Welcome to the walkthrough of assignment 4B's Frequently Made Mistakes for my CS 5254 class. First, as always, please make sure you document your code thoroughly. And second, please make sure you run all the regression tests. If you're having problems with the tests, make sure you post them on Piazza so we can help you. Let's take a look at a problem with build model in the Palantiri manager class. This implementation doesn't fulfill the comment specification of above, which says to use Java streams instead of a for each method. So make sure you do that. Let's now take a look at problems with acquire. First, before you do anything else in acquire, you need to acquire the semaphore before trying to do anything with the loops. So make sure you do that. Secondly, please make sure that you call readlock interruptibly. However, make sure this call goes before the loop. Next, you should be using entry set here, not Palantir. And as a consequence, you need to get rid of this call to get key, because we just can basically get the entry set and return that. Down here, you need to make sure that you store the return value that comes back from try convert to write lock, because otherwise you're going to be having some problems when you try to release the stamp later, the right stamp later, or the correct stamp later. Down here, you don't need to call this method if try to convert to write lock is successful, since it already will have returned a write lock. So there's no need to try to block again and get a write lock again. That's completely wrong. The call to acquire needs to go at the very beginning of the method before you do anything else. Don't use replace. Instead, use the set value method on entry set, the mutator method. There's no need for you to have this catch clause at all. Try never to catch an exception and turn around and do nothing else but rethrow it. If you're going to do that, just go ahead and let the exception percolate out normally. Don't unlock the stamp here. The unlock should go into a finally block at the very, very bottom of this method, and it shouldn't be the unlock right call, it should be unlock. Likewise, you need to, after you unlock the read lock, you need to block again on write lock interruptibly, and then you need to go ahead and make sure that you've done the right thing to loop back around again and get the appropriate key, entry set. And this code, you need to refactor this so there aren't two calls to unlock read. This code is just structured incorrectly. Let's now take a look at another problem with acquire. This implementation is incorrect. You shouldn't be using, or you're not using the conditional write lock feature of stamp lock properly. You need to first try to find an available Palantir with only the read lock held, and then after you've found it, then try to convert that to a write lock once you've found it using the read lock. This code down here is kind of on the right track, but it needs to go much earlier with only the read lock held. It needs to go into a loop, of course. And also, never set anything with only the read lock held. So when you refactor this code, this should be being called with the read lock held. So in that case, don't be doing set value. Down here, we see the acquire method. This call doesn't belong here in acquire. It goes somewhere below, but you don't want to be calling that method here. It doesn't belong there. In fact, you are calling this method down here below, so I'm not sure why it's being called twice, because it's not being used. And then also make sure that you take the return value from try convert to write lock and store it somewhere so that you can use it later to unlock the appropriate lock in the appropriate mode. Another problem, here's some code that is sort of along the right track, except it needs to go into a loop because it may not succeed with just one call. And then secondly, make sure that you don't try to call set value when only a read lock is held. That's very important. And the other thing too is make sure that you return, also return entry set, not Palantir, because you're going to need that later. Down here, there's some other code that needs to be fixed using entry set. And when you're at the bottom here, you need to make sure that you, after you acquire the lock interruptibly, you need to loop back around again and rerun the logic again once you've got the write lock held. And that means this whole thing has to go into a loop. Okay, some more problems with acquire. So once again, don't be making calls to put. In this context, be using the entry set value instead. And I don't know what this code is doing here, but it doesn't belong here. It's all this extra work. You can just refactor stuff so that you just loop around back to the top and start over again with the actual lock held. Some more problems with acquire. Don't start out by trying to convert the read lock to a write lock. You first need to identify the available entry using only the read lock. That's the whole point of using stamped lock. So you can try to distinguish between read and write locks. So make sure you get that right. This call, I'm not quite sure why it's occurring again, but it doesn't belong here. This is where you need to basically go ahead and reset or loop back around again, and then make sure you try to do some stuff at the beginning to get the appropriate entry set. This code is coming way, way too late. It needs to appear much earlier in this method, and you don't want to be using get key. You want to be using, please use, you don't want to be using get key in this case. You want to be able to figure out if something is set. So this is the wrong method reference here. And also don't be using replace. You definitely don't want to be using replace, since that's sort of missing the whole point. And since you're using a stamped lock, to avoid having to use what replace does. So you should be using entry set instead. And now we're taking a look at the release method. Most people got that right because it was almost identical to what you've done in previous assignments, just using a stamped lock with a write lock mode. But the first thing you need to do is, as always, check to see if the Palantiri is null and bail out if so. If you have problems like this, it's a real indication to me you're just not running the unit tests, or you're running the unit tests and you're not paying attention to what the output means, because the unit tests will catch that problem. So make sure you run the unit tests. That'll save you a lot of trouble. I'm not sure why a read lock is being acquired here. That's not what the comment specification says at the beginning of that method. So go back and take a close look at that. There's no need to call get here at all. There's no need to call try convert to write lock. You should just be getting a write lock in the beginning. All the logic above is too complicated. I don't know. Don't call release unless replace returns false. And you need to make sure that you check the value of replace. This, again, is really pretty much exactly what was done in assignment 3B's release in the Palantiri Manager. So I'm not quite sure why the code is being revised here incorrectly. Take a look at what we covered either for your assignment 3B's release method and see if you did that right. If you didn't do that right, please go take a look at the frequently made mistakes video, which goes through this in great, great detail and shows how to do it correctly. As always, there's no need to catch an exception and just rethrow it again. That's unnecessary. Don't call unlock write. You need to make sure that that is called before you do the release. So you want to unlock before the release and make sure that you do that. Doing it in the finally block is correct. That's good. And then finally, I'm not sure why there's a call to unlock read here. There shouldn't have ever been an acquiring the read stamp in the first place. So go back, take a look at what you did for assignment 3B, take a careful look at the specification, comments, which explain pretty much exactly what to do for release. This code is just way, way, way too complicated. Okay, so that's a summary of the frequently made mistakes that I saw when I reviewed people's submissions for assignment 4B for my CS 5254 class.